Hello, my name is Margaret Piatt, and I'm here representing William Piatt, a Purple Heart recipient for his service in the Army during World War II. He was my father, and he died in 1983. I was asked to tell his story, and I feel honored to do so. But I think it's difficult for any child to imagine a parent's life before they were born. I was born in 1951, during the decade my parents had looked forward to, the years happily married after the war. Like many other veterans, my father did not like to talk about his war experience to his children. But I think all children see the remnants. They're hard to understand. The first thing I really remember as a little child, how playful he could be, and then suddenly his hand would start to tremor. Nobody ever explained that. They did explain why he threw himself on the floor every time he heard a loud sound. At first, I just thought it was a game and threw myself on the floor too. But then as I got older, and so did he didn't stop doing it. He could quickly shift from warm to irritable. And I remember by the time we were teenagers, he sometimes would be so sweet, and 10 minutes later, barking orders at my brother and me using military language we didn't understand. We learned to clean the kitchen floor. Sometimes, when watching World War II movies, even something as lighthearted as Hogan's Heroes, he would cry. And he drank, sometimes too much. I know that what this all means now. I know how these are symptoms and behaviors of conditions that I think are much more a part of our society awareness than they were in the 1950s, and I'm glad of that. Over time, I came to understand both the cause and the effect of all those behaviors. But as he aged, I also came to see that he had incredible fortitude in working to overcome those problems. They never really kept him from wanting to do new things, wanting to meet new people, wanting to go places, wanting to be a warm personality. But even more than that, as he aged and went through multiple medical problems unrelated to his war experience, I came to see what courage and good cheer he had in facing physical pain. How do I tell his story? I can't. Instead, I'm going to let him tell it himself through excerpts from over 50 letters that I have, which he wrote during the time he was in the service. Every soldier, of course, comes from a family. And so I would like to take just a minute to give you the context of the family he came from. My father was born in 1914 on a farm outside of West Liberty. He lived as part of an extended family, which included his parents and his grandparents, an uncle and his wife and their 8 children, his cousins, 2 unmarried aunts, and by 1916, a younger brother, Brother Jim, who's often referred to in these letters. They all lived together in a stone mansion built by my father's great-grandfather, and by the time he was born, it was oddly enough also open for the touring public. They called it Macacheek, which is what it's still called today. In the years before my father became a soldier, he faced many family losses. By 1920, when he was 6 years old, his uncle had died, his wife had remarried, and the family had moved, taking away my father's favorite playmates. His grandmother, mother, and father all died in the influenza epidemic, and his favorite cousin died in World War I. By 1930, when he was 16 years old, his grandfather had died, and the family, by that point, this large extended family, now consisted of 2 aunts, Marguerite and Bertie, Bill, and his brother Jim. By 1940, when the story of his life as a soldier begins, his other aunt had died, and the family was Bertie and Jim. These are the 2 people who are mentioned constantly in these letters as they talk about the farm, the neighbors, and managing tours. During the war, he met Frances Monahan, and they married during the war, and from that point on, she's frequently mentioned as well. The book that I have here that I'm going to share with you, as I said, contains over 50 letters that were written between 1940 and 45. My father wrote these to Bertie and JJ, as he called him. My mother wrote to Bertie, and sometimes my brother wrote to Bertie when he was in the war. I'd like to thank David James for transcribing these letters, and to Robin Ferriman, who recently located even more, which we will have ready by Memorial Day. So let me pick up this book and share excerpts sharing with you time and place. Starting on August 13th, 1940, just a month before his birthday, he writes from somewhere in Wisconsin. Just listen to the young person in this letter. Dear Aunt Bertie, we reached this camp about 5 a.m. yesterday, and this is the first chance I've had to write. Don't let anyone tell you that this state has no ragweeds. We're camped in a 30-acre field that is knee-deep in those darn things. My hay fever started as soon as we landed. It sure is a wilderness up here. There's a jungle next to our camp, about 2,000 acres for it, swampy and full of pine trees and ferns. And oh yes, mosquitoes. I never saw so many. They give us nets so we could sleep. Everywhere you look, you see guardsmen. You won't know when I get home. You won't know me when I get home, I don't think. They are working us harder than you ever worked me. We are starting on a 12-mile hike in a few minutes, full packs and all. I hope we make it. And then, as an aside, couldn't find any envelopes to tell today. Can you send me some money? And he goes on telling that the water here isn't good, and if you would send me $1, I could have some better water because we have to haul it 10 miles and we get 50 gallons for our outfit. So we spend our time drinking Cokes and lemonade. Such a young man. He spends several years in camp. This is in Camp Shelby, first in Wisconsin, then in Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and then finally in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where he goes through his officer training. You'll notice as these letters continue and as he gets older and has harder experiences, he complains less, which is something I thought was quite interesting. This is a letter from August 16th, 1941, from Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Things are about the same here, although they look much brighter than a week ago. There have been 20 men flunked out of this class so far, but I don't think that many more will be, as they need so many officers so bad, and most of all of us are doing a pretty good job with our grades. I don't think I will get flunked out. There are only 5 of us here who are out with the National Guard. All the rest are old regular Army men, so we really have a high standard to keep up with all of those regulars, and they are very nice about helping us 10 soldiers, as they call us, whenever they can. Well, he was hoping to be an officer, and he wanted very much to make the military his career. This is something I did not know growing up. That was never said, but it's obvious in these letters. During this time, before he goes overseas, he met my mother in Omaha, Nebraska, and he writes this letter on April 6, 1942. Dear folks, I received an order today that has upset all of my hopes and plans. I have been ordered to join a division combat unit at the port of and go overseas. Where I am going, I do not know, and if I did, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I will leave here in the next few days, so if you don't hear from me for some time passes, don't worry. For you know in the Army, no news is good news. Fran is going back to Omaha to her mother's place. Write to her often. Even though she knew this was likely to happen all along, she is very unhappy about it. So please try to keep her cheered up. There's little else to say. I am a soldier and I have my job to do. God bless you both. P.S. Enclosed some snapshots of the wedding. This happened on their wedding day. He left the next day. She wasn't very happy about it, but she did understand. All right. Somewhere in North Africa, December 3rd, 1942. Dear Aunt Bertie, just a few lines to let you know that I am safe and well and give you a little of the latest news. Yesterday and today seem to have been 2 very important days in my Army career. Yesterday, I received my promotion to first lieutenant. That was something I had been looking forward to for a long time. But today, I got something I wasn't looking for. The general called me out in front of the outfit and decorated me with the Purple Heart. I didn't think I had done anything to earn it, but everyone else said I did, so I couldn't argue with them. It seems that when we landed here, I stopped a little piece of shrapnel that the reception committee was dishing out at us. And when it didn't stop me, but I kept going and taking care of my job, they thought I had done something wonderful. I really wasn't hurt at all, just a little cut over my right knee, which was already healed and in good shape. I guess now you can hang my picture in the Family Hall of Fame. Everyone here seems to think I'm quite a hero. No, I don't feel that way about myself. I just feel like I wish this mess were over and I could go back home again. somewhere in North Africa, July 1st, 1943. Oh yes, I saw one of the boys from West Liberty the other day, Harry Fowdy, son of the one who painted our signs. He is the first fellow from home I have seen since I was in England. He has been over here nearly 2 months, but like everyone, it will be glad when this is over and he can get back to the States. Must close now. Africa, August 15th, 1943. Dear Aunt Bertie and JJ, well, I'm back in Africa again. I am in the hospital getting a physical check. My colonel had been worried about me losing a lot of weight, and I was getting sort of cross and irritable, and he was afraid I was sick. Here at the hospital, they say I was just tired from all that I had gone through. 8 major battles in 9 months is bound to wear most anyone out. And yet they haven't made up their minds that what they will do with me. But they said my days with the combat outfit are over. The doctor, on my word, is trying to fix it up so I could go back to the States and teach. I hate to leave my outfit, but I was pretty tired. I sure would like to get back to the States again. I have been overseas 13 months, and now it seems like 13 years. I really do think I could do for a good back there. I think I could do a lot of good back there teaching some of the boys who were going over. I really don't feel bad as I'm getting lots of rest, and the food is pretty good, so I can't kick about anything. Sicily, September 24th, 1943. My dear Aunt Bertie and JJ. At long last, the hot spell seems to have broken for a few days, and now we have some cool weather. In fact, at night is so cool that a jacket feels good. It sure has put life and zip back into all of us. The burning heat just seems to drain all of us, and for a fellow, we all feel better now. Seems almost like back home. Living in tents as we do, I can't say that I would care for any snow. But if I were there, it would be a nice warm house I would see and snow outside. We got it in snow a couple of times last winter in the mountains down in Africa, but that was far from being pleasant. Sicily, October 13th, 1943. My dear Bertie and JJ, since my last letter, I have spent a week in the hospital again. It seems as if when I wasn't looking, a mosquito slipped up and bit me and gave me a mild case of malaria. So they packed me off to the hospital and poured me full of quinine. I took as much quinine that my ears buzzed like a bunch of bees, but I'm feeling much better now and back to work again and really feeling fine. The cold weather with a little rain now and sure helps a lot to help a fellow feel like working. I expect by now it is really getting cool at home and corn husking will be in full swing, and it will soon be butchering and hunting season. I sure would like to sink my teeth into a good fried hind of rabbit. I guess I may be just a little homesick, but I've sort of gotten used to being away these last 15 months. Somewhere in England, January 7th, 1944. When I had the malaria, I went down to 140 pounds. Now I'm up between 175 and 80 and still gaining. The effects of the malaria as yet haven't entirely worn off, but they are gradually leaving me, and I'm feeling much stronger. The thing that really bothered me the most was a mild case of concussion caused by a pretty big bomb exploding near me. At the time, I thought I had blown my blamed head off, and it left me pretty nervous for a while, but that trouble has completely disappeared, and I'm really in fine shape. I think I could lick my weight in wild oats. And the letters go on. But there are 2 more I'd like to share. One, because, again, it connects back to his home, and it tells an interesting thing about my mother. Regarding home, he says, I really do enjoy the news clippings from home. I used to get the Banner, that would be the West Liberty Banner, the local newspaper, but I guess they lost my address, and I haven't gotten it now since I've been overseas. There are a lot of fellows from home and service now scattered all over the world. And then when he talks about my mother, who had become a superintendent of schools, he thinks that she's working too hard, and he doesn't think she should. So he looks forward to the time when she doesn't have to do it any longer. However, I have to put in as an aside, to her dying day, my mother complained that when the war ended, she was forced to give up the favorite job of her life, being a superintendent for schools, because a woman was no longer allowed to have that job. I think sometimes the way my father wanted her to be wasn't exactly the way she was. Final letter, again on his birthday, Stark General Hospital, Charleston, South Carolina, September 13th, 1944. My dear Aunt Bertie and JJ, I landed here yesterday after a very quiet but long crossing. The finest birthday present I can ever hope for. I still hardly believe it to be true, that once again, after 25 long months, I am back home again in the good old USA. I called Fran yesterday as soon as I arrived, and I would have called you too, but I know you have no phone. And it goes on. But I think it's so charming because it captures both the life in West Liberty in 1944, when somebody didn't have a phone, and the life of his wife back in Nebraska. And it continues on from there. He does also say, I've had wonderful care here. I saw Father O'Connor from Cincinnati today. He asked about you in Macacheek and was sure glad to see him. The last time was in Camp Shelby 3.5 years ago. So I love the fact that he came home on his birthday. I think that I could picture Jimmy Stewart saying that line with all of this enthusiasm. And when I read all of these letters more carefully and think about them and feel them, what I really see is a person who was suffering but worked so hard to tell the bad news, couched in the positive attitude so the people back home would not worry about him. And I think that takes a lot of courage. Thank you. Well, it obviously means a lot to me because it would have meant a lot to him. You know, he was a kind of, there were parts of him that were modest, but lots of parts that weren't. I mean, the people who didn't like him often said he was kind of a braggart. And I remember that about him too. I kind of really have myself struggled with having a big outgoing personality, but not wanting to seem like a braggart. And I think he felt that way. The conflict between Memorial Day and running the tourist business, in which Memorial Day is the busiest weekend of the year, was felt every year in my home when he wanted to go and do a part of all of the ceremonies, and my mother didn't want to be left at home running the business on the busiest day. An interesting thing about that is that as one reads these letters, they never intended to come back to West Liberty. He had all kinds of other plans. She had other plans. And even though, you know, they used to say that they never intended to come back and take over the castle business, my brother and I didn't believe that. We didn't believe it because he acted like it meant the world to him. So if it came down to the choice of participating in Memorial Day or staying there and doing the family business, he would always give in and do the family business. But I know he wanted to be at that parade, and he wanted all that came with it. And so I want him to have that too. I remember the feeling I had at his funeral when they gave him the salute and the Knights of Columbus raised their swords. And I turned to my husband and said, boy, would Daddy have liked this, right? Because he really did love a lot of fanfare. And in some ways, he likes that more than I do. So it meant a lot to me, and I'm really grateful to you for making this possible and letting me share some of his stories.